the River Liffey running through the heart of Dublin, and spanning it, the Samuel Beckett Bridge. Like the river, literature is an integral part of this city, which has spawned some of the greatest and most influential writers of the 19th and 20th centuries.
I like Samuel Beckett. And there a few weeks ago I went to see a play of his, Waiting for Godot, and it was absolutely enchanting.
The playwright, Samuel Beckett, is one of no fewer than 4 winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature associated with the city of Dublin. At every turn, there are constant reminders of its literary heritage. Writers who have been commemorated with street names, bridges, memorials and statues. From contemporary poets such as Seamus Heaney or Patrick Kavanagh to key literary figures from the past 2 centuries. One of Dublin's most famous sons, the late 19th century writer Oscar Wilde, was born here and can be seen languishing on a rock in Merrion Square as he gazes towards his old family home. While the life-sized bronze statue of James Joyce stands sentinel in O'Connell Street, appearing unperturbed by the bustling crowds around him.
Well, you're actually sitting in Ireland's largest and oldest cafe, 86 years this year. It's had quite famous and infamous people visit it over the years. Anybody from scholars, playwrights, of course. James Joyce, most notably, would be very associated with Bewley's as a whole, as he mentions in Dubliners. But also, if you come up to the modern era, Sir Bob Geldof has been noted to write some of his original tracks like Rat Trap. People like Sinead O'Connor, actors, you know, and people from artists and stuff like that have been noted to come in and out through the cafe, as well as our regular clientele.
Which Irish authors are famous in Dublin?
Well, there are many. Obviously, you've heard William Butler Yeats, you have Samuel Beckett, Oscar Wilde, George Bernard Shaw. There's a whole plethora of different Irish authors. Probably the most famous of the lot of them, perhaps because he set his work entirely in Dublin, is James Joyce. But there are many. Dublin is a highly literary city. Up until, say, in and around the 1880s, a lot of Irish authors, like Oscar Wilde, like George Bernard Shaw, even William Butler Yeats, went to London to establish their literary careers and their literary credentials. It's with William Butler Yeats that there's a change. He gets very frustrated with London. You've got to remember that in the 1840s, Ireland suffered this most horrendous famine. And it really did change the whole outlook on what being Irish was, being Irish within the British Empire. And you shouldn't forget also that Dublin was the second city of the empire. But by the same token, it was also a city of extreme poverty, where very few opportunities. And there is, if you read, for example, the stories from Joyce's Dubliners, there is this sense of paralysis that you won't get anywhere. You need to get out in order to get on with life. You look at a James Joyce, you look at a Samuel Beckett. These are individuals who chose to go to continental Europe, who chose to live in France, to live in Italy, but never really forgetting about where they're from. And I think Beckett is a very interesting case, and it's linked directly to Joyce, because Beckett went over to Paris as a young man, and he used to work sometimes as a secretary for Joyce. But when he came to write his own works, he was so influenced by Joyce that he decided what he had to do was to change the way he wrote completely. So he decided not to write in English, but to write in French. And this was an act of kind of asserting his own individuality, because it was too easy for him to be influenced by Joyce and Joyce's style, because Joyce's style is very dense, it's very thick, it's Hiberno-English in many respects. It is the use of the English language, but shot through with kind of an Irishness that many people find shocking. And this is one of the great things about Irish writers of the late 19th and 20th century, is what they did to the English language. And Irish writers, they exploded the staidness of the English language, and it becomes almost like a polyphony. They introduce all different kinds of elements into it, and it's a very kind of rich and all a very subversive thing. It's not an innocent thing. Irish writers all Irish writing is political in many respects, and is also a way of kind of answering back. This is, if you like, post-colonialism writ large. This is writers reaffirming their national identity through the language of the other, the oppressor, if you want to call it that. And don't forget that this cultural revival happens in Ireland. It precedes the political movement towards independence. Even today, you walk into any pub and you'll find someone scribbling in the corner, and who knows if they're going to be the next William Butler Yeats, if they're going to be the next James Joyce. You'll always meet somebody who's writing a novel, although latterly they now say, I'm writing a film script. But, you know, it's still very literary.